Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. Ukraine War News Update, first part there for the 6th of July 2024. It's very late, sorry. I think the whole of the last week has just caught up with me and I couldn't get out of bed this morning. There's no football, no rugby, nothing for the boys. My partner's up at Blenheim Palace with some friends and I was just, I need some sleep. So I was watching in bed the beautiful honouring of Pete the Medic, Pete Fouché, by Greg and a huge number of people. Some lovely imagery coming from Greg's live streams with Pete's body being taken to Maidan and then to the Catholic Church and then the service in the Catholic Church. So incredible work by Greg and Zhenya and all those around Pete and his family. Rick the Ukrainian as well there. They're just doing a really good job to honour Pete and the sacrifice he made for his adopted country of Ukraine. And I felt, that I was drawn in obviously to watching that and paying my respects in that way. So if you get a chance to check out the Greg Terry Experience, go and see the videos he has done this morning. And thank you to those who contributed. I've donated to Project Constantine from people who donated to me on his behalf. Just if you do that, it's always better to go directly, by the way, because then people like YouTube don't take a cut, so on and so forth. So it's always better to do direct donations. But thank you very much for that, and I've passed that on and some. So we are going to start with the Ukrainian General Staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before, all the usual caveats apply as you can imagine. We have 1,260 personnel lost, so that's an uptick from what we've seen over the last couple of days, just a little bit. 11 tanks, just a smidge above average. Same with the 18 armoured personnel vehicles. 66 artillery systems is another huge day of Russian losses in the category of artillery. The Ukrainians are doing, if this is to be believed, are doing an absolutely sterling job of degrading the Russian artillery capabilities and capacities, although it seems to be that they have an endless supply. I mean, like I've said a million times to you, so many people come on and say, you say they're kind of, these are unsustainable losses and blah, 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 etc., etc. But look, they've still got all this artillery. Yes, because they have stockpiles of thousands and thousands of pieces of artillery, but they are using worse and worse artillery, and of that worse and worse artillery, each subsequent piece that comes out of stock of those deep stocks will be of lower quality. They will have barrel maintenance issue. They will have issues with just all of the working parts of the gun, no doubt, because with each successive, they will naturally take the better conditioned pieces from stockpile first. And as you're going through those stockpiles, you're getting to the worse and worse pieces that you have to do more work to, or that if you don't do work, comes to the front line with the range issues because the barrel is imperfect, so on and so forth. So when I say unsustainable losses, they are not able to sustain the war at the rates they were at the beginning of the war. This is a very changed Russia. With what they're using, with the number of artillery shells being fired a day. Remember, it was 40 to 60,000 a day, the last I saw, and this is going back some months, was 10,000 a day. I'd like to know what the Russians are firing right now. So 66 artillery systems lost there. No multiple launch rocket systems or anti-aircraft warfare systems, but 76 vehicles and fuel tanks is very high in that category, and 6 pieces of special equipment. Dell has literally just messaged me. Good morning, Jono. An equal record high for artillery at 66, with the 7-day average now up to nearly 60 a day. I wonder if drones are the new and far more efficient method of counter-battery fire. Yes, absolutely agree with that. The counter-battery technique of using drones rather than having a radar that tracks the parabolic trajectory of a artillery round leaving the barrel and landing, and then they go, right, okay, that's come from there, and you get your own artillery to then target that coordinate, and you try and do that as quickly as possible. 3 to 6 minutes is really good for counter battery fire, But the idea is that actually drones have taken on that role. Might not even be counter battery. They could be like spotting for explosive, flashes here and there, and then taking out a piece of artillery, or just hunting artillery generally. So not so much counter battery as just destroying artillery. But with spotted drones identifying the target as and when they fire, and an FPV readily available to strike almost immediately. So that's great from Dell. Thank you very much for that. Let's go and check out his stats, actually. And remember, he's updated the way these are linked in the description below. He's updated his data sheet at the beginning here so if you go to the left, you have your daily numbers, the last day being today, so the 6th of July listed there. And then as we come to the right a wee bit here, just so that you can see it. I know my face is sort of there. So we have 6th of July then repeated here, and we have the losses per day, and then the record, then the rolling 7-day and 30-day average. So he was talking about artillery here. Artillery is, if we highlight that, is the artillery plus. So the average is 17 a day. We've seen 66 lost today, and that is a record high. It's in the record high column there. And the rolling 7-day average is 59.57. The Ukrainians have done an incredible job. The 30-day average is 48.8. This is just an incredibly good statistic there, if it is indeed accurate. And of course, all the caveats apply to these claims. But if true, the Russians must be suffering in terms of artillery. The 30-day average also interesting there. So thanks, Dell, for doing this, and thanks for alerting me. Absolute legend. And we must have a pint before you move house. Right, just a bit of personal whatnot going on there. So we'll now move on. Unfortunately, no Andrew Perpetua stats today, yet at least, but we do have a few other anecdotes to throw in here. So in the Lipetsk area, BTG, Lipetsk Battalion Tactical Group, I don't think so, or maybe from the Battalion Tactical Group there, 20 have been killed out of a unit of 55. That's a lot of 300, a lot of injured, as well as dead. Only 8 returned back. Wow. So that is, again, anecdotal. Who knows the accuracy of these sorts of claims, but it gives you an example. As someone says, a BTG with personnel 55. So I think it's from a BTG, I would have thought. Belgorod hospitals are overcrowded. Now, I showed you some patients in Belgorod outside the hospital in the car park. Well, it seems to have got even worse now. Belgorod hospitals are overcrowded. The wounded are being distributed to schools. Right. So here is some video footage coming out from there. Now, it's again when we're trying to paint a picture of what's going on, right, and trying to be as accurate as possible. And we hear all these things about Kharkiv being unsuccessful and being very costly for the Russians. Then we had, so not only do we have video footage directly of people being blown up and stuff getting destroyed, etc., etc. You have claims from Ukrainians. You have claims from Russians. You have Russian POWs captured in the area, and other Russian sources saying it's all terrible, we're taking huge losses. Then you have Zelensky coming out and saying we had 1-4 or 4-1 Russian to Ukrainian loss ratios. That has moved to 6-1 since the Russians have started attacking Kharkiv. Then you get imagery of hospitals showing people outside. Then you get imagery of injured people being taken to schools because the hospitals are full. And then you get, these, like I said, Russian and Ukrainian claims like these. So there was one claim that there was 300 people and 9 survived, was it? And all those sorts of anecdotal bits of evidence. But you piece all these together to say, right, it is bad in Vovchansk and in the Kharkiv direction. In fact, it's probably a good time to listen to what Romanov said. So Romanov is this mill blogger of ill repute, if you like. And he has said a number of things, right? But he said it quite candidly. which could get him in trouble. He's done that a few times before. If you think about Evil Gherkin, who's now in prison for doing stuff like this, right? So anyway, Z military blogger Romanov gives a candid assessment of the Russian army in a 10-minute long video. It's interesting as well because he must have done that in a video where he's right next to an oil refinery that gets blown up last night. But we'll come to that later. This is a synopsis of what he said from the Dead District. There's a few points here where I'm trying to make sure the English makes sense. But anyway, the activity of FPV drones of the armed forces of Ukraine is very high, and the intensity of the use of cluster 155mm projectiles has become less than during the attack of the armed forces of Ukraine on Robotyne. So intensity of cluster munition projectiles is less than when they were using them at Robotyne. And that was when they got that whole load of cluster munitions in May of last year and were using them freely. Seems to be that they had less of those cluster DPICM shells than they did, and that's probably understandable, but they have very high usage of FPV drones, which all the data suggests. FPV drones of the armed forces fly both in the Kharkiv region and in the border regions of the Russian Federation. Baba Yaga bomber drones fly at night. This is from the Ukrainians. The price of the offensive in Vovchansk cost the armed forces of the Russian Federation a third of the loss of personnel as during the offensive in Avdiivka. It is more in reality. I don't know if that's what he says or dead district. So that's to say that of all the losses on the front lines at the moment, a third of them are coming from Kharkiv, which is what it was like when they were attacking Avdiivka in October, November, December last year. So a third of the whole frontline losses came from Avdiivka. And that was insanely expensive. They were only able to properly break through when the aviation guided glide bombs started hammering the crap out of the Ukrainians, and the Ukrainians ran out of weaponry because of the 7-month stalling that started actually in September of 2023, and then that came to a head and the Russians were able to push forward, but it came at a huge cost for the Russians, certainly initially. The Russian armed forces in Vovchansk lack coordination of actions. There are cases when Russian soldiers storm a building that is already under their control and suffer losses. They appear to be attacking themselves. Notes that the successful works of the birds of Magyar, so that's Magyar, the drone, very successful drone group that moved from Dnipro to Kharkiv. Got to remember it's quite a big group now, so they will be operating on multiple sectors as well, these guys. But anyway, they are having an effect, as has been widely reported, up in Kharkiv. In the Kharkiv area, there are many FPV wings of the armed forces with repeaters, due to which they fly at long distances and hit targets. So we are starting to see 30-kilometer strikes and more. That's 30 kilometers behind the front line, so you're thinking maybe 40-kilometer range there. The Russian armed forces wanted to move the border by 15 kilometers so that Ukrainian armed forces could not fire into the Belgorod region, but it's impossible to do this because the direction of the armed forces, there are M142 HIMARS and Patriot air defense systems under the cover of electronic warfare. The armed forces of Ukraine are accumulating and transferring some reserves from the Zaporizhia direction to the Kharkiv direction. Russians are waiting for the offensive of the Russian armed forces in the direction of Sumy, but the armed forces of Ukraine know about it, so it could be another axis that opens up, another sector there, but the Ukrainians are prepared. The Pantsir S-1 are the most effective system for combating Ukrainian attack drones, but they stood at the same positions in the Belgorod region, and therefore they were destroyed, and then kamikaze drones of the armed forces of Ukraine flew into the region. So Belgorod is now suffering from those Pantsirs, and we saw video evidence of those Pantsirs taken out. On the border with the Kharkiv region, there are Russian soldiers, and behind them are TikTokers, so Kadyrovites. This is something else we've heard, that there are barrier troops, that the Kadyrovites were barrier troops, but also we heard that when the people they are supposed to be stopping retreating and shooting their own Russian soldiers, when there were none of them left, the Kadyrovites were the frontline troops and they refused to do the frontline activity. So it's all kind of crazy. There are 7,000 former Wagner fighters in Belarus. So that's a bit of an extra nugget on the end from in the end. Yeah, there's just people have been wondering about what Wagner have been doing since they lost their leader Prigozhin. there have been lots of claims about them being sent to Africa. There's lots of Russian activity in Wagner and other PMCs, private military companies, working in Africa. But then there's been this slow trickle of troops, Wagner troops coming back into the armed forces of Russia, maybe under other PMCs, maybe under the conventional armed forces themselves. And then a claim here is 7,000 in Belarus, probably training Belarusians up, but also maybe getting ready for some other activity, who knows. So I thought that was useful to throw in there. Now, the other day I showed you this video. This is such a common thing to see as well, and indeed Andrew Perpetua says they realised that this was a viral clip that everyone on Earth has already seen, right? So common. So what it was is a video clip of a Ukrainian IED dropping drone flying over 4 people carrying a Russian injured soldier. And the drone dropped these bombs, but maybe it's windy. They seem to like skew over to the left, and it missed the guys, but it was close enough to freak them out. They dropped the guy in the stretcher, but the guy in the stretcher stood up and ran and like left the others behind, right? Ran quicker than the others, and the drone just follows this supposedly injured person who's being carried on a stretcher, just absolutely running for the hills. Run for the hills, run for your lives. And he seemed to be miraculously saved. So all of these viral videos were saying, look, our drone bombers are miraculously healing Russian soldiers. And then this appears from the Russians with a Russian watermark on it saying the Severian drone miraculously cured a Ukrainian armed forces fighter with the help of life-giving VOG. And this is what they do, is they take Ukrainian videos and they whack a Russian watermark on them and then say that this is the Russians doing it. And this has happened consistently throughout the war. And this is another example that is a load of rubbish. It had been doing this circuit for a good 3 or 4 days before the Russians then started claiming it was theirs. Of course, we know that, but they're playing to a particular domestic audience that won't necessarily be sort of checking the provenance of these claims. Now, the Russian forces using what seems to be an Iskander-M TBM ballistic missile there destroyed a Ukrainian S-300 PS positions, which is what I think we already knew this one. This is not another one, but typical cook-off indicates it was not a decoy. At least 2 tails and 1 flap lid, radar under mast, and likely very well covered 54K6 were destroyed by the strike. So this is just more confirmation that the Russians are absolutely hammering the Ukrainian high-value targets at air bases at these medium-range levels with the use of reconnaissance drones. Lots of people are absolutely incandescent with rage, with frustration that these drones, these Orlans and whatnot, are still able to do what they are doing in acquiring these targets that get taken out by these Russian Iskanders that are so difficult to shoot down, the Iskander-M. And you can go and watch a video there. But this is such a challenge for the Ukrainians. The S-300s are such a vital part of their air defense network. Yesterday, a strike was carried out on the command post of the 66th Command Brigade near Novokhovka, occupied Kherson region. 6 drones were used. The attack destroyed a tropospheric communication station, likely an R412, and an electric power station. 2 Russian servicemen got wounded, but this is going to be one of these sort of fairly high value strikes for the Russians, for the Ukrainians, on some Russian, comms station and whatnot. That's in the Novokhovka, but I don't think it sort of overcomes the loss of an S-300 system, that's for sure. Okay, so now going on to distant strikes. The Ukrainians shot down 24 of 27 Russian kamikaze drones last night, which is a pretty good interception rate. 3 getting through. Don't know where the 3 got to be honest. But yeah, they were launched by Russia from Kursk and Crimea. 12 different regions were targeted by the Russians, or at least they were shot down over 12 different regions. So it's quite a widespread launch, a widespread targeting campaign there for the Russians. I need some tea. Oh yeah, and I don't have any more information about those Russian strikes, but the Ukrainians seem to be, at least from the video footage coming out, far more successful in their strikes last night. So the Krasnodar region came under a massive Ukrainian drone attack. It says no reports targeting and damaging the Lukoil depot at Pavlovskaya and the Rosneft oil depot at Leningradskaya, and damaging a mobile phone tower in Yeysk. So 3 places targeted, and some serious fires going on there. Right, I unfortunately I can't show you these closely. I tried to do part of a video yesterday with this forest fire going on in fact, I'll talk about that in Kherson, and then it got restricted, and it's the most incredible footage of this forest. So an ammunition depot, I think, was hit on the left bank of Dnipro, or it could have been an island. I'm trying to work out there, or there could be 2 separate things happening. But anyway, there was fire starting, and it's very, very sad. Obviously, all these trees burning and the wildlife and the ecosystem. But the Ukrainians struck Russian ammunition depot, and then Russians were kind of fleeing. And then I saw another video 24 hours later of just huge fires all around, and a truck full of Russian soldiers, many of them stripped down to the kind of like, it's so hot. You can see some with like sort of burns, I think, and people jumping on a truck and trying to, getting ready to get out of Dodge. And it looked like an absolute freaking apocalypse. Absolutely terrible. There's these massive fires around. If you go on the socials and search up fire in Kherson, you will see it. In fact, if I just do that now, fire, and I won't show you the video, but you can see them in small. I'm sure you'll get a sense here. Yeah, here are the ones. So those of that video top right there, absolutely insane video. And here's the firm's data. So that's firm's data of what's going on in Kherson at the moment. So it's really important to talk about this, actually, because there's some, obviously this is war, and the ecological damage is heartbreaking. But on the other hand, the Ukrainians need to take out the Russian war machine, and unfortunately in the midst of summer, this is what's going to happen. It's been the same up in Serebyansky Forest. It's just terrible. But this will cause the Russians quite a headache, actually, logistically. And you could imagine a situation where the Ukrainians could think, here's a time to capitalize and try and get across the river. And in fact, there is a claim. There was one source had a claim that the Ukrainians had taken back some land in Krinky, which is they got out of Krinky, got out of Dodge. Now, I've not seen any confirmation of that, but could have happened, right? But anyway, so that is something that's taking place. But back to the strikes last night. So these 2 strikes were sort of 225 and 260 kilometers from the front line. So the strikes, no, that's not what I wanted to see. Helps if I press the right damn things. Okay, so that is the sort of region you're talking about, where these 2 oil depots are situated. Oil depot Pavlovskaya on fire after tonight's drone attack. So these places are still on fire, it seems. Tim White reports Ukraine launched its own drone attack with considerably more success, it would seem. Russia says it shot down 7 drones in Belgorod and 1 in Kursk, but stayed silent about Krasnodar, where this happened. So huge fire erupting there. Maybe Russia had to move air defense systems from Krasnodar to Crimea because they lost so many. Whatever the reason, Ukraine hit 3 targets in Kuban. Previous video showed the Lukoil depot, and this is Leningradskaya. And then you had a mobile phone mast taken out as well at Yeysk. The Ukrainians having quite a bit of success. And then Russian military blogger. So I just already mentioned Romanov, but he was actually at the scene. So that 10-minute chat he gave, that we've just looked at the synopsis for, he was actually at the oil depot at Krasnodar region when this happened. Judging by the footage published, no air defense worked or could be heard in the background, and a drone accurately hit the fuel infrastructure facility. Everything is fine, he says, as the oil depot starts burning. In this case, I do agree. Nice. So that looked to be quite close. I don't know if someone's given CPR there. Now that's still burning. The one at the Lukoil depot is still burning, and the other one, it seems, is still burning as well. So NOL report says it's still not under control. Today, the firm's data shows the ongoing fires. And that's quite significant fires because you've got quite a few squares here, 6 different squares on the firm's data. That's the NASA satellite data to show wildfires initially is what it's designed for, but it's very useful for finding out what's burning in a war zone. Russia is also burning off emergency burning off gas after possible sabotage at a 330 kilovolt electrical substation in Budyonovsk in Stavropol Krai. The entire city lost electricity. So there seem to, and this is not from last night but from previously, there seem to be issues with electricity coverage in a number of places, as well as the effect on the hydrocarbons infrastructure. You also have the issue that Russia already had, that they don't have enough customers and enough demand for their gas, so that they often have to burn it off because of all the sanctions, particularly from Europe. The exports into Europe were cut off by and large, and so they don't have no way of storing it, and they can't stop it, so they end up having to burn it, which is obviously a massive waste, environmental disaster, but it also shows the problems that Russia face with regard to a hydrocarbons industry that has been pretty much hammered by the war. Certainly with gas. Russian soldiers are still being sent to fight in Ukraine with broken legs, despite protests from Russian mill bloggers. Meanwhile, injured soldiers who recorded a video last week had their crutches taken away or have been sent to a torture camp, is the claim here. So another good Chris Wiki thread. Haven't dropped into these for a long time. So the Russian blogger Anastasia Kashevarova reports that after a video was recorded by 50 injured soldiers in Ukraine, quote, more messages came about sending untreated mobilized contract soldiers to the front from the Samara region and from other regions. So this brought about a slew of other videos detailing how the conditions are terrible and injured people are being sent back to war. The picture at the top of this thread shows a man with an external fixator on his leg who Kashevarova says is waiting in the Samara region settlement of Rochinsky for a bus to take him to the Donetsk People's Republic in Ukraine. So this chap that clearly can't walk properly is being sent back to the DNR. This is the attitude, quote, this is the attitude towards Russian men, she complains. You should not only fight others, but also protect your own. They are defending you and you treat them so shabbily. How can all our officials have the conscience to go to events, to make speeches, to speak high-minded words when they cannot solve real problems? When Russian Vanya stands on one leg near the bus, smokes and goes back to war. Sleep well, he will defend you today on one leg, while you on two can't get your arse in gear to solve problems in the rear. The future of the original group who complained on the video, says Chris Wiki, is still uncertain. Kashevarova says the commanders initially tried to claim that the men were, quote, a special contingent, i.e. convicts, and were therefore not entitled to anything. However, she says they are, quote, a hodgepodge, not only prisoners, but also ordinary contract soldiers and volunteers. She reports that, quote, a general came to their location and told the local commanders to correct the situation, to divert attention. It was corrected. But as soon as everything calmed down, some commanders again began to behave as before. Relatives had told her that after an inspection, they were sent to a hospital and their phones were confiscated. Subsequently, despite their injuries, they, quote, had their crutches taken away and are being discharged, presumably to be sent back to the battlefield. The man who spoke on the video is reportedly being punished more severely. Kashevarova names him as Artem Sheripov and says that he has been taken, quote, to the military commandant's office in Zaitsev. That Zaitsev place is famous for people who have refused to go to war or refused to go back to the front. It's kind of like an area where they keep soldiers and sort of semi-torture them before forcing them back to the front. It's been mentioned a number of times, Zaitsev, in the Luhansk region. This has become, there it says, this has become a notorious place of detention. Sorry, I haven't read this thread, but there you go. Many reports over the past 18 months have identified the basement of the House of Culture Community Centre in Zaitsev as the site of the Joint Army FSB facility where recalcitrant soldiers are starved and tortured to remotivate them. Nothing like being tortured to give you some motivation. As Kashivarova comments, Zaitsev, quote, has already earned itself such a reputation that the basements of the Lubyanka, the infamous HQ of the KGB and FSB, are resting. Meanwhile, Kashivarova reports the authorities of the Donetsk People's Republic are also intervening by, quote, checking units for undertreated fighters. However, quote, the command is trying to hide them. So things are not well, right? And this is yet again another piece of the jigsaw to give us that indication. Right, in Russia, you've got your man here, Vladimir Kara-Murza, who is a Russian opposition activist. He was sentenced to 25 years in jail for nothing really. So it's become known that he has been moved to the IK6 corrective colony in Omsk. To the regional hospital number 11 in the Federal Penitentiary Service of Russia in the Omsk region due to a sharp deterioration in his health. His lawyers were not allowed to visit him. He's an absolutely decent and intelligent person, says Anton Gerashchenko, which means that he is alien to modern Russia and Putin. I've repeatedly heard that Putin will kill Kara-Murza, and now he is being killed. Yet Evgenia Kara-Murza, Vladimir's wife, recalls that he suffers from polyneuropathy, a disease caused by 2 severe poisonings committed by Russian special services, which is on the list of diseases that prevent him from serving his sentence. Vladimir Kara-Murza, previously recognized as a foreign agent by the Russian authorities, has been in custody since April 2022. He was arrested for spreading, quote, fakes about the Russian army after he condemned the war unleashed by Russia while in the United States. So he was persecuted for telling the truth. In July 2022, a case was initiated against him for participating in the activities of an, quote, undesirable organization. On April the 17th, 23, the Moscow City Court sentenced opposition politician and journalist Vladimir Kara-Murza to 25 years in a maximum security penal colony, because this is what freedom looks like in Russia. This was the punishment requested by the prosecutor. The verdict was handed down by Judge Sergei Podoprigorov, who is on the Magnitsky list, which was created thanks to Kara-Murza's efforts, so working with Bill Browder there. The hearings in the Moscow City Court were closed due to the conclusion that the case was a, quote, state secret. The Russian authorities constantly fight and destroy all those who tell the truth and pose threat to Russia. Indeed, lots of people absolutely incensed about this. Gabrielis Landsbergis, the Lithuanian foreign minister, says to celebrate Orban's visit, so Orban visiting Moscow, which is highly controversial, Putin has decided to hospitalize another political prisoner in Siberia. This time it's Vladimir Kara-Murza. This is how peace negotiations work in Russia. Weakness is met with ridicule, olive branches are sharpened and used to kill. I got a lot of time for Gabrielis Landsbergis. A blackout schedule. This is what I was talking about earlier. There are issues with energy inside Russia now. A blackout schedule is being introduced in the Rostov region of Russia, just to the right of Mariupol, down by the Sea of Azov. Russian media report that the reason is a lack of capacity. For 2 days now, residents have been complaining about the lack of electricity in various parts of Rostov. Traffic lights are not working. It's impossible to heat food and turn on air conditioning at home. You shouldn't invade other countries. And finally, the intelligence update from the UK talks about how VPNs have been, I won't go into the full details, but they've taken VPNs off Russian app stores. And this is as a kind of answer to the Russian population's ability, if they have the know-how, to get information outside of the Russian state media and information bubble. If you get a VPN, you can pretend it's a virtual personal network private network, that essentially makes your computer or pretends that your computer is in a different country or your internet address is in a different country, so that if you're inside Russia, you can make it so that the network thinks that you are actually in, say, Finland, and that means you can access international media, whereas Russian internet service providers will cut off outside media to make sure that the population lives in a bubble. So VPNs have been targeted for some time by the Russian state. Separately, the Russian media has also reported that Russian Federal Security Service FSB has demanded that Russian telecom operators stop providing voice over internet protocol telephony services. So at the moment, telephone lines, old school telephone lines will work over telephone lines, a separate kind of communication line. But nowadays, so say in the UK, we've just moved over, like BT, British Telecom, has moved over from those lines to voice over internet. So actually, telephony now goes through the internet. But I presume that's more difficult to listen into, maybe, by the Russians. So VoIP is increasingly the international industry standard due to its broadband efficiency and the ability to integrate telephony into a unified communication system together with email and video teleconferencing. The implausible official FSB justification is that the measure is meant to reduce instances of fraud. In reality, it's highly likely it's intended to increase the ability of the Russian authorities to monitor and restrict the communications of private citizens and corporate entities. These two measures are both in line with the Russian efforts to control its domestic information environment and limit citizens' access to information that does not align with government narratives. Because this is what freedom looks like in Russia, right? There is no freedom, so don't come on my frickin' threads and tell me that that the Russian war is justified and it all is well in Russia, and Ukraine is inhibiting freedoms and liberties, because that's a load of bunkum. Anyway. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe and share. Take care. And I do apologise that I am somewhat late with this video.